the wars. The wars had a very, very negative effect on family life. Before the wars, a Roman soldier might go out and fight in the spring and be home in the fall and spend all fall at home with his family, and then not have to go out until he got this garden, his crop plowed and ready to go. Then he'd go out and fight his wars. But with the Punic Wars, this event lasted many, many years, and soldiers would go away and be gone for several years. And this had a really bad effect on family life. For one thing, oftentimes their wives could not manage the farm without them. Farms fell into neglect, and a lot of small farms found their way into the hands of the rich because the wife would be forced to sell the farm. Of course, many soldiers died. Some soldiers came home permanently crippled, unable to work anymore. And of course, there's always the case when during a prolonged war, a soldier might come home and find his wife married to someone else. This has happened in many, actually probably every. And I was in the Army once myself, and a lot of times these young men will get out away from their families, some of them for the first time, and do things that their parents taught them it's wrong to do, away from their wives, and do things that they don't want their wives to ever find out about, etc., etc. This goes on in the Army. Well, anyway, the wars really had a bad effect on family life, and a lot of soldiers lost their farms. And the land then found its way in the hands of a few wealthy people. Large farms were formed, and the smaller farmers was thrown out of business because he could not compete. Well, into this scenario stepped two men, Tiberius and Gaius. They were brothers. Let's see. Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. Now, Tiberius was the older. He became a senator. He went before the Senate and asked the Senate to take lands from the rich and give these lands to the poor. So the rich have a lot of land that's lying idle that they're not using, and every rich person can spare his land. And also take public lands that were owned by the state, rather than owned by anybody in particular. Give these lands to the poor. Well, he became quite popular among the poor people. And in fact, he became so popular, a lot of people in Rome became worried, and they accused him of trying to set himself up as a king. And Rome did not want kings ever to come back to him, because they remembered that, hey, a few generations ago we had kings, we didn't like him. So, to make a long story short, I mean, you can go into detail, but if you look him up on the web, you can find more detail. But the Romans rose up, and a mob came along and killed Tiberius Gracchus. His brother took up where the Tiberius had left off. He was a champion of the poor people, and the same thing happened. They killed him also.
Why didn't you just tell people that you didn't want to be a king? Unless he did
Well,
that too.
You cannot reason with people that way. I mean, if they make up their mind that you're guilty, you're guilty. A lot of times, you can't convince a whole crowd. Keep in mind, too, there were no newspapers, there were no radio, no television, so word did not travel the same way it does today. But something else, folk. You might think that politics in America is dirty. Perhaps you're right. But politics in America is not as dirty as it ever got at home. As generally, we don't resort to assassination to get our enemies out of our way. There might have been a few exceptions. I mean, folks, there's all kinds of stories that President Kennedy was murdered to get him out of the way, and not just killed by one gunman, but killed by a big conspiracy involved a whole lot of high people. Be that as it may, we have generally not done that, but in those days they openly killed the Gracchus brothers. Again, because politics can get really, really dirty. And once some people have set against you, there's nothing you can do to persuade them. And if you haven't found this out already, you will. And I was told, you've got to, but as an older woman, you've got to learn to resolve your differences. Well, what do you resolve? There's no agreement you can come to, because the other person might be completely on the wrong side of the issue and take up a stance that you just simply cannot agree with, and it won't quit fighting you. Or a stance you absolutely should not. I mean, I could name case after case in my own personal life. Now, I want to say this about the Graupius brothers. They go down in history as heroes. They were martyrs, and I don't doubt that both of them sincerely believed that what they were doing was right. However, I have to rate them as being wrong. You don't give lands, take land from the rich and give to the poor. And somehow I think that the Roman Senate were wiser than they were, and they knew it. Not that they had to resort to murder to get their way, but it's something that has not worked. A better way would have been to let these people slowly build up their wealth and gradually learn how to manage it. I mean, the poor people. Set up systems of banks and credits by which they could buy the land on credit and spend 30 years paying it off like we do in our country today. I mean, this might have worked, but they did not know that. They did not know about banking. They did not know about loan lending institutions. They did not know about investment. None of this existed at the time. So the poor were permanently poor. Again, there have been time after time when it's tried. Well, occasionally you get a man who's called a novus homo, or a new man, Marius. All right, now my wife was telling me late last night that she had watched a documentary about the present governor of Kentucky. The present governor of Kentucky is about 51 years old, and hey, folk, I've told you, I thought I grew up poor, but compared to him, I must have been rich. He was one of 6 children. They had no television, so all they could do was read books. I mean, you know, in the 1960s and 70s, when he grew up, everybody had televisions. He didn't. But today, he's governor of the state. He's going to be what the Romans would call a novus homo, or a new man. But Marius started out very, very poor, and he managed to sneak in and get control of the army, and here's how he did it. I mean, they'd never make him an officer, because to be an officer in the Roman army, you had to have been born into wealth and power. Well, he was born in poverty, but he managed to go away from the Roman citizenry and recruit troops from the provinces, from distant lands. It would be like somebody building an army by hiring men from Canada, hiring men from Guatemala, hiring men from Brazil, and forming an army of a hodgepodge of people from all kinds of countries, and promising that if you win the battle, I can pay you. If you don't lose, I can't. This is what he did. Now, he did something else, very, very dangerous. Now, I joined the army one time, and I was in the Georgia National Guard for 6 years. When I joined, I put one hand on the Bible and raised my other hand toward heaven and swore an oath to fight for the United States. Marius had his men swear an oath to follow him, to fight for him, not fight for the Roman Senate. He was supposed to have them swear an oath of loyalty to the Roman Senate. Instead, these were men who did not want to swear an oath of loyalty because they were foreigners anyway. So they swore an oath of loyalty to follow him, General Marius. So he got together an army, illegally perhaps, but nevertheless his army took the field and won. He became extremely popular among the common people of Rome, so much so that a lot of Romans began to worry about him, not just because he had risen up through the ranks, but I mean, he was just too popular for a government that was afraid of being taken over one man. Well, to defeat him, the aristocrats appointed a general named Sulla. Sulla was given the necessary money and troops, and he got together a bigger army than Marius. And actually, I mean, there was a struggle here. Sulla was sent to fight in the east, but the plebeians wanted Marius, who was really a poor man like themselves, wanted him to lead, but the Senate wanted Sulla to lead. So they wound up fighting a civil war, Sulla and Marius. Sulla won. Then sensing that he had a great amount of power, Sulla actually went to Rome itself and took command of Rome itself and made himself a dictator. And this, again, this was something that the people of Rome really did not want. Fortunately for the Roman Republic, Sulla tried to maintain that he was keeping the Republic, but he made reforms that made it easier for Julius Caesar, who came later. Essentially, the Republic was almost dead, even though historically we say the Republic isn't dead yet, but it almost was dead. Well, after Sulla passed off the scene, Rome went through a 50-year period of various men struggling to get control, with the Senate struggling to keep them out of control. Eventually you got the coalition of three top men, Crassus, Pompey, and last, Julius. I say last, but he turned out to not be least. When all the smoke had cleared, this was the man who took over. We know him as Julius Caesar. Anyway, Crassus was the richest man in Rome. Pompey had won a lot of battles, and he was given the title of Pompey the Great. I mean, he was the top. And then there was Julius down here. He was one of the three, but they didn't expect him to be as powerful as the other two. Well, they came to some kind of a truce and settled the differences, at least temporarily. All right. There was a big rebellion that occurred in Spain. The Senate sent Pompey to put the rebellion down, and Pompey did. He returned to Rome a big hero. All right, so they got the title of the Great. Then, these three men formed what's called the First Triumvirate. There was another triumvirate that came later. Again, first time they got together and somewhat settled differences. Pompey was given lands that he could give to his troops. I mean, these men got what they wanted. Now, finally, Rome sent Crassus over to Syria to fight again and conquer Syria. Julius was sent to Gaul to conquer France. Gaul was and Pompey was left back in Italy to keep order among the Italians. Well, Crassus was killed in battle. One of the many accidents, sometimes even the general gets killed. Crassus was killed. That left these two. Julius went into Gaul, conquered Gaul, and sent back a message to the Roman Senate with three famous words: Veni, Vidi, Vici. They can be pronounced Veni, Vidi, Vici. Three Latin words: I came, I saw, I conquered. Some of you have heard it. Again, if any of you want to pronounce it, you're welcome to do so. I had a man pronounce it this morning. Anyway, three Latin words: I came, I saw, I conquered. Julius at this point was really, really popular and really powerful. I mean, after all, these Gauls were descended from the Celts, who had sacked Rome just a couple of centuries before. Now, Julius, as a young man, visited a museum one day, and there in the museum was a bust of Alexander the Great. And Julius Caesar said, broke down in tears. He said to the statue, "You conquered the whole world when you were younger than I am, and here I have conquered nothing." That was before he conquered Gaul. But anyway, he conquered Gaul. The Roman Senate feared him, so they sent him an order: we want you to lay down your army, return to Rome, and retire to your farm as a private citizen. Julius refused. So Julius then got his army together and began to march to Rome. On their way, they crossed the river called the Rubicon River, and it became a famous expression: I have crossed the Rubicon, because when he crossed the Rubicon River, he turned around and burned his bridges that led across the Rubicon. And that's where we get the expression, burn your bridges behind you. Cortez later was doing this. When Cortez landed in Mexico, he had his men burn a ship, said, we're either going to conquer Mexico or we're going to die trying. but there's no retreat. We're here to stay. Julius Caesar said to his men, we're either going to conquer Rome or we're going to perish. There's no going back. I have crossed the Rubicon. He went into Rome. He met Pompey in battle. He defeated Pompey. Pompey fled. Julius Caesar took up the pursuit of Pompey. Pompey was eventually killed, not by Julius, but killed by persons who thought they were doing Julius Caesar a favor. Julius, it is said, wept when he learned that Pompey had been killed. But nevertheless, Pompey's death meant that Julius was now dictator. Within a few years, he had himself named dictator for life. And at this point, the Republic was dead. Permanently dead, never to rise again. At least not until many centuries, but actually more than a millennia later. So, the end of the Republic was complete. The failure of democracy in Athens and Rome was to give democracy a bad name from which it was to take centuries to recover. All right. Once in office, Julius Caesar tampered with the calendar. He named the month of July after himself. Now his successor, Caesar Augustus, was to name the month of August after himself, and then he wanted to make Augustus as long as July was. July is a 31-day month, so he took a day from February, because February was considered unlucky. Took a day from February and added it to August, and that is why August has 31 days, so does July. Julius Caesar was not content unless his month was as long as any of them. Anyway, Julius Caesar tried hard to placate all of the nobles. Particularly, he tried hard to placate one high-up nobleman named Brutus, and thought he had Brutus on his side. He did get the common people on his side. The common people really were enamored with him, because he brought an end to the Civil War and brought some kind of peace. Now, during this time, he had a wife, but that didn't keep him taking another wife. He married a woman named Cleopatra. Cleopatra was a member of the Ptolemy family. She took over Egypt because when her father died, her brothers were younger than she was, so she was able to take over Egypt. When she married Julius Caesar, this gave Julius Caesar the land of Egypt to be his. They had a son together named Caesarion, whom they hoped would grow up and become the next Caesar, but it didn't happen that way. All right. Now, this is part of the story, leads a lot of people to believe that Julius Caesar was epileptic. 60 or so men got together in a plot to assassinate Julius Caesar. They said, we're going to do it on now the word Ides means like a few days in the middle of March. Every month has an Ides, but the Ides of March began on March 15th and lasted for a few days. On his way into the Senate chamber one day, a blind soothsayer told him that you are going to die on the Ides of March. Now, I'm not saying this blind soothsayer had mystical powers. What I think happened really was that some of the assassins told this blind soothsayer, because the assassins did not keep the secret very well. Also, one of the assassins told his wife, and this wife told Julius Caesar's wife, and this Julius Caesar's wife, not Cleopatra, told Julius. This is known. Your book suggests that Julius Caesar had several warnings, none of which he heeded. It's like he got warning after warning. Anyway, on the Ides of March, Julius Caesar walked into the Senate chamber, and he passed by this blind soothsayer, and he laughed, hey, it's the Ides of March, and I'm still here. And the blind soothsayer said, the Ides of March are not over with yet. Yes. Unknown to him, 60 men had put daggers under their cloaks, a cloak being an outer garment, like a robe. 60 is some of them, yes. That's what your book says, some 60 of them. And this leads to the expression we have today called cloak and dagger. And they did not have metal detectors. So anyway, 60 men were wearing cloak, and they said to each other, now, 30 of us will get in front of him, and 30 of us will get behind him. But we can mill around and talk to other people who are not part of our group, or we can talk to each other. We'll just mill around a bit like nothing out of the ordinary is going on. And then it came time to do business. And one of the men said, hey, Julius, now, listen, I have a brother who's in need of some help. Maybe you come in. No, Julius said. Someone else gave him another petition of things they knew he would not agree to. And his reply to all was no, no, no. Then the man in charge dropped his tunic a little bit, dropped his robe down. This was a signal. Every one of the other men pulled their daggers out of their cloaks. It was said that Julius Caesar tried to defend himself, but he looked around at him. His last words were, "Et tu, Brute," you too, Brutus. Then he resigned himself to his fate. The assassins actually wounded each other, a lot of them, several by not his daggers, because Julius Caesar didn't have one, but by attacking him with such fury that they knifed each other. But Julius himself was the only one who was killed. All right, again, before I leave, most people who have assassinated their leaders wind up regretting it. These people were no exception. They thought, hey, we're going to restore the republic. No, instead the people go and chased them out of town and killed them all.